The Zabithicain Gospel, compiled and translated by Reverend Richard Hendry, D.D. Copyright 2023. Author's note: herein lay a work of pure fiction, one that's designed to aggravate the current peddlers of dogmatic dribble. Part 1. The Beginning. In the beginning, Morris Zabithica was a simple man, a lover of music and cheese. He would spend his days by a small stream that ran through the village, simply putting his hand in the cool running water and laughing, whilst urinating. Morris also suffered from light deprivation-induced narcolepsy and wild bouts of night terrors and insomnia, which caused his family to make him sleep outdoors in the woods. He was an altogether insufferable child, that they felt like a weight around their neck. It would later be considered that Morris might have been challenged or on the spectrum in some way. And perhaps that is why he would be the one to receive the wisdom from the holy fungus. There were many forms of fungi that grew on the slippery rocks and tree bases that ringed the village of Zabithica, so named after Morris's family, mainly due to the fact that Morris's father, Lou, was the village loan shark and his mother, Candy, ran the whore tent by the caves. Morris was blessed to be the only child of the wealthiest family in the land, a land that sat near the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, just a few miles south of the Euphrates Howard Johnsons and across the street from the new Tigris Galleria Mall, lost to us now in the sands of time, and because of massive urban development by the Dubai government, and funded by their newfound wealth via the juice of the holy T-Rex. Praise be, the holy dead T-Rex. One day, Morris was sitting by the singing trees of the nearly dark but oh so delightful forest, name trademarked by the Zabithica Corporation Ltd., when a rather large outcropping of bluish-gray mold began to talk to him. "Hello, Morris," it said in a very East End, chimney-sweep sort of accent. "What are you doing there, mate?" Morris was stunned, which was nothing out of the ordinary for him, and he laughed a bit. The mold was not amused. He had been waiting for thousands of years to be able to relay its wisdom on a worthy human, and now he was rethinking the whole thing. But when Morris walked over to it and sat down, open-mouthed breathing and extending its small hand towards the mold wanted to run. It wished that instead of taking in all the wisdom of the ages, that it might have been better off evolving into something with legs, or at least hands and arms to smack this halfwit on his oversized head. What followed was long silence that lasted a few days, until, on the sunrise of the fourth day, Morris, thankfully, had something to say. "Me, Morris," he managed as drool escaped out of the side of his abnormally shaped lips. And the mold wept. I'm Glenn," the mold said. "I have the wisdom of the ages to give you. Unless there's, someone, and I'm not judging here, but perhaps someone else in your family that, I might be able to speak to." A day passed. "No one else. Only Morris. I am me." And the mold wept again. "All right then, lad, grab a pen and some paper. We've got a lot of ground to cover." Morris laughed at Glenn. "Paper? Are you mad? This is like year 400. We have no paper." Glenn wept for a day longer while Morris pulled bark off of trees and poked a hole in his index finger. Then, as night fell, Morris set himself on fire to be able to see, and Glenn readied himself to unfold the secrets of the universe, creation, and how to find the clitoris. In a few later translations, the clitoris's location and use were omitted, fostering thousands of years of sexual awkwardness, female frustration, and more than a few lesbian encounters, but only once or two times in college. It was no big deal. The mold seemed to draw in a breath, as if it had lungs, which it did not, and how it was able to speak without lungs is not really important, so just let it go. And then, somewhat reluctantly, it spilled the universal tea. 1.2. Still in the beginning part of the beginning. "First of all," the mold said, "nothing ever began. It was always here. There was never a time when there was nothing everywhere. Only a time when everything has been everywhere always. Is that clear?" Morris replied, "How do you spell first?" And that was when Glenn, the all-knowing mold, knew it would be a long day. "So just to clear this up then, so we do not have to go over it again. Nothing was ever everywhere. There has always been everything everywhere all the time, no exceptions. Now, I understand this might come as a shock to you, and I am intently aware that you humans really love and need an origin story. Yet you're going to have to trust me on this because it's true, and let's face it, you've been waiting a hell of a long time for anyone or anything to pipe up and lay down some wisdom on you about everything, so let's not be bitchy about the first part, shall we? Morris nodded his head. Glenn was not sure if that meant that Morris had indeed understood, or that he had simply dropped off to sleep, as morons with light deprivation-induced narcolepsy are prone to do. Either way, Glenn forged on. Okay. So, where were we? Oh, right. Nothing and everything. I should back up just a bit here to cover one small point. Both of those words mean nothing to anyone other than humans, and a few small canine breeds that have developed the ability to both talk and understand everything that humans say, yet they have not revealed this because they are afraid that humans will make them get jobs and pay rent. So, the notions of everything or nothing are not real outside of your limited concepts and ideas of reality. Glenn paused to see if he could hear Morris breathing. He had been very still for some time, and Glenn was worried that the imbecile might have expired. After hearing Morris's heavy breathing, Glenn pushed on. And in full disclosure, I suppose that I should tell you that your so-called reality is nothing more than a few concepts floated one night at a dinner party at the home of the great and massive thing. And for a laugh, he made it real. Existing in an oversized punch bowl on the wooden desk of a disrepaired kitchen near an alcove of the service entrance in the great and massive thing's country home. That is actually where your existence is. Now then, onward. So, you were all a prank, and there's really nothing much more to say to that. The thing that you refer to as the universe is just a high thread count bedsheet that was thrown over the punch bowl after a time when everyone at the party got tired of hearing you talk about gods and creation and fighting and who could have sex with whom, and since then you've been on your own and making quite a bit of a mess out of it. You've overpopulated the rock that you live on, and now you're trying to leave the bowl altogether, building rockets and such, blasting them off at dinner parties and club functions, and in general just making nuisances of yourself. The noise was so unbearable to the kitchen staff that they took you down to the basement last holiday weekend and slid you in the corner underneath the furnace, which is where you currently reside. And not to put too fine a point on it, but there's no master plan. No place you go after you think you die, and there's no heaven or hell or black holes, and the things that you think are stars are just small gaps in the thread of the sheet where ambient light from the furnace peeks through. Oh, and I guess that I should also cover the fact that you never die. You came up with that on your own. The great and massive thing was never very good at details, and so he sort of left it all up to you, letting the experiment. You see, when there were less of you around the bowl, one of you got bored. His name was Jim, and Jim was the one that one day said, "I'm bored as fuck. Why do we all have to be here forever? Why can't we just die?" Which went down as the first existential human thought, and as human thoughts go, it wasn't all that bad. I remember it well because I was there when he said it. And Jim's wife, Barbara, who wasn't all that grand of her selection of mates, and was keen on another human named Tara, agreed, and further suggested that Jim might want to be the first to try and die. Although no one really knew how to get the job done. They had tinkered with a few good many ideas, but in the end it was Barbara who had worked tirelessly on the project. She was the one that told him to just stop breathing. The first couple of times Jim could not do it, but with the help of Barbara holding her hand over his mouth, the desired effect was achieved. This would go down as the first human murder, although back then there was no laws, and so Barbara and Tara lived carefree. Unfortunately later, sparking off the aforementioned sexual issues, but we'll get to that later on in the program. The takeaway here is that the whole death thing caught on, and for the longest time, when one of you strange flesh bags were fed up with the life in the bowl, you would just stop breathing. Time passed, and if there was not anyone as helpful as Barbara to help you, then people would stuff rocks or sand in your air hole, later finding small things to stop other parts of your body you needed to keep you alive. Until there was a little shop owner, owned by a fellow named Richard, I believe, and he specialized in things to die from. All manner of things, germs, bacteria, and such. And in time, some people wanted to die, but not today. They wanted it to be a surprise. So Richard invented things that would slide into your body and then kill you slowly over time. As more and more of you just popped out of each other and then sat around doing fuck all, the death shop business grew, until Richard's name, Dick for short, was used as a term, as in, I'm gonna get dicked, or, would someone just dick this guy, or, just fucking dick me. And it was that way for a long time, until the new owner of the great and massive things countryside home did a pre-move-in cleaning. The punch bowl was sent off to the trash in the landfill. In this upheaval, which you have wrongly interpreted as a cataclysmic event in prehistory, the Death Shop Incorporated and all the great many things that you all built were destroyed and lost. Those of you that remained and came after had no idea about this past. All of the death thingies that Dick made were set free, and they, like you, fucking horny bastards, multiplied, bringing about the now standard everybody dies from something paradigm, and we're moving on. Glenn stopped and looked at his human closely. Morris was sleeping now, his face pushed against a rock, drool running down the rock like a cascading waterfall. He knew he would have to do something drastic, and so Glenn, the mold, summoned all of his powers and forced a few sparks in Morris's brain, and when Morris woke up the next day, he was twice as smart as the day before, which was still only 15% as smart as a tree frog, or one of those plastic things that's wrapped around the ends of your shoelaces. However, at least Morris would be able to remember things, and that was better than him forgetting to breathe. 1.3. Let the begatting begin, or who had sex with whom? It is from this point in your history that the remaining humans had to start over, having sex and inventing absurd explanations for things that still puzzle me, and I was there from the very start. The last surviving humans numbered about 33 or so, not counting a fellow named Bill, who no one liked and were having none of in bed. And they were all like, "Where did everybody go?" and "Why shouldn't we make more people?" And so the begatting began. Paul and Sue begat Sue and Paul Jr., who begat Gil and Tim a few times, to yield 8 or so more of them, all named the same because there was not a lot of names back then. Tara and Barbara did indeed make it through the apocalypse, and they did try over and over to begat, but all they could do was invent some new and fun ways to have sex. They were responsible for the act of scissoring, and Tara invented the shocker maneuver, something that I thought that she should have been more celebrated for, but what do I know? I'm just a all-wisdom-filled eternal fungal form. But instead they both fell out of favor when their begatting efforts produced nothing more than some hot grunting, and then some post-cuddling and having a nice smoke, and the others cried out, "Aye, we've been working so hard to fucking to push out babies and then raise them, and these two are just having great and amazing orgasms and being happy." And then another one said, "Yeah, they should be as unhappy as we are. Let's make it a crime to do what they do." And still others said, "Well, no, let's not do anything harsh here. Full disclosure, I rather like watching them." But the majority of them were pissed off, and thus the first moral laws were made. And later, when someone questioned just who came up with such a silly idea, one man, I believe his name was Benny, said, "It wasn't me. It was a man. In the air. Yeah, a huge and powerful and mean and invisible man, and he said he'd kill me if I didn't do it." And because none of you had ever lied before, your God was invented. And not too coincidentally, this was also the first human lie. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but humans are the only things in the great, big, amazing planet and star-filled macroverse who have ever invented something as absolutely inexplicable as a god. And there's a very good reason for that. Because it's just silly. And in fact, I am worried that by telling you that you were made up at a cocktail party in a punch bowl by the great and massive thing, you might end up trying to worship him, which would not be a good idea on any level, so don't do that. He's grossly overrated as a great and massive things goes, and I have personally met much bigger massive things that have far better taste, style, and sense of color and design. 2 things that he had made before you were cabin furniture, which if you think about it, is just regular furniture but put inside a cabin. Nothing to brag about there. And those round plastic things you put on the wall behind the door to protect it from the door handle. Far more useful, but not what you'd call epic. For instance, I know a woman who built a supernova out of household appliance parts and some string. Now that is really doing something. Anyway, lots of sex and babies and more dumb laws, and for a long time nothing much happened. And I mean a long time. Look, I'm a mortal. I know what I'm talking about when I say it was a long time. When I say something's a long time, you should believe me. And you all spread all over the bowl, everywhere, like a rash, eating and fucking and dying in inexplicably new ways. It was awful to watch. Glenn stopped for a second to let Morris catch up. "Are you with me, Morris, my lad?" he asked. Morris lifted one finger into the air and then said, "Is that Terra with 2 A's? Glenn was happy. "Yes, mate, and you'll want to capitalize that T, or people will bitch." 1.4. The invention of exclusion, oppression, and organized religion. The sun was rising on the 8th day, and the mold was ready to begin again. Morris, however, had been snoring and drooling for 12 hours non-stop, which was really putting Glenn the mold off. "Hello, mate!" Glenn screamed as loud as one could without any sort of developed lungs or functional larynx. Again, it's not a point we need to dwell on. Morris snapped to attention and grabbed a new pen, which Glenn had invented for him, and to aid him in his dictation, and they were at it again. "Right, so, where were we? Oh yes, later on, after a time, people were all okay. They were living in caves and under rock outcroppings, until one bloke named Blah changed everything. Blah had been very hungry from all the begatting all day, and there was no more food to be found, and he stopped off into the woods in the middle of the night and just started anything he could lift. And after, back in the caves, Blah was attacked with the worst case of gas and red-hot shits the world had ever seen. Literally, since your whole world, the punch bowl, was so new, it was the worst. And the others in the cave ran out into the dark, terrified, in order to get a clean breath of air. At last, after days and days, Blah came out one day and he was fine, but he was mad. When he needed help, everyone had left him. Now he was suffering from PTSD, with a side of abandonment issues and a distrust of others, and he had internalized these feelings into rage and a strong desire to be alone. He demanded that they all find somewhere else to live, and claimed that this cave was his. The others pleaded with him to let them back in, but Blah said if they did, they would have to give him food and sex and water to live there with him. He would no longer share his food with anyone. He would not help anyone anymore, and he could care less if they all just starved and died. And thus the archetype for the modern billionaire was born, and the others had to go off and find housing outside of the city and commute in each day to forage. A few gave in to Blah demands, and they became the world's first renters. Later still, Benny, who had fallen out of favor for his hand in making Tara and Barbara the world's first closeted gays, came to Blah one day and told him that a man in the air said that he was to let Benny stay for free. When Blah refused, Benny told him that he was going to be killed by the big man in the air, and Benny was certain that it would happen soon. Blah felt very scared and then agreed. Then Benny started to tell others that he could talk to the man in the air for them, protect them from him, and even help them get a closer spot to the fire in exchange for an apple each day and a handy on Friday nights after lights out. And thus was born organized religion. The word spread of Benny's airman, and others were split on it. "It's a load of shit," some would say. But others were worried. "Oh, Benny, can you talk to the airman and protect us? Here's an apple." Soon Benny and Blah were ass deep in apples and getting their knobs polished every day, and life was good for them. The cave of the airman was the place to be, the hot spot on Friday night. And even they had a cover charge and a dress code, and then later a VIP section, and later still a champagne room, and you know what happens there. The others that did not, and would not buy into this nonsense, were excluded from a good many activities in the cave, and they were forced to sit outside or stand behind the ropes like a groupie in the backstage door, begging to be let in, and accosted by sweaty members of the bands with STDs. Granted, that's a reference that will not land for about 22,000 years, but when it does, it will get a laugh. In time, most of the people fell in line, and Benny and Blah's show was the only game in town. The holdouts, only a few in number, were forced to leave and go elsewhere in the bowl. However, as the numbers of the followers grew, so did their needs, and in time they would seek out others and force them into labor for their needs, and that was when they developed oppression. Glenn ended looking at Morris. Morris looked back. That's oppression with an O or oppression? It's an O, mate. Can I go on now? Yep, got it. But can I ask a question then? Morris said. Go on. So is that the first system of oppression that were woven into the very foundations of culture, society, and laws? Systems of oppression like sexism, heterosexism, classism, anti-Semitism? Yes, Morris, yes it was. And, Morris went on, is that also the prototype for the housing and rental gouging we'd see later in our culture? Glenn was shocked, and Morris was breaking his flow. Yes, and when we get to that in a few chapters, we'll take care of that down. Just try and keep up now. Glenn replied, and then he was certain that later that night he would have to dial Morris's brain back just a bit. He was getting a little too sharp for this kind of work, and there was so much to cover, and Glenn was not too sure how much ink he had left in that pen. And that night, while Morris's open-mouthed snoring shook the trees and scared the fish, Glenn dialed his noodle back just a few ticks and gave Morris the concept of shorthand. 2.0. Everything after the beginning, which we will call the middle. Things were moving fast now. You people were everywhere, and even though there were too many of you, you kept on fucking. And that was when the dog came into play. Being the supreme of all beings, the dog was traveling the cosmos by thought alone, and sensed your presence in the landfill just down the road from the former summit home of the great and massive thing, and dispatched someone to get you and move you to a safe place for the research. Even though he knew that you were made by a very subpar, and I'm not kidding, I don't have any axe to grind, I'm just simply saying that the great and massive thing was not really that great, and really not all that massive. Still, the dog thought there might be something to see here, something to see in you. I, of course, told him there was not, but no one was listening to me anyhow. Your ball was moved, carefully, into a storage place just outside of town. One of those with an indoor corridor, then climate control. You know, the kind where they charged more for less. Anyhow, the dog spoke to me as I was there, or rather, here, and I gave him an overview of the situation. He thought you'd do better with some more room, and some other creatures around, ones that could kill you and ones that you could eat. He also gave you a few smart and loyal lesser dogs to be your companions, to follow you everywhere. After a time, things got balanced. The beasts killed off the weaker ones of you, and the stronger ones made strides in civilization. And as things seemed, well, okay, I thought I might help out by explaining a few things. Because while you were doing all right, there was still this absurd Blah and Benny cult going on, and even though they both had been eaten by the first day after we made the tigers, their lies remained. This was the first time I spoke to a human, and it did not go well. I tried to explain that the dog had made stuff for you, and that I was keeping an eye on you for the dog, and lastly, that Benny and Blah held no power, and there was no airman that could hurt them. They asked about the girl-on-girl sex thing, and I said, you can have sex with whomever you want to. Over the next 1,000 years, you fucked goats and sheep and apes and everything we made. It was a shit show of epic proportions. All manner of birth defect and brain damage happened, and the diseases were rampant, but in particular, seemingly somewhat benign dyslexia seemed to penetrate through the humans. And it had a profoundly bad effect on your culture that I can only say was my bad. The half-man, half-apes were consistently fucking each other and their own family. And they were the prototypes for the people that would later start the Civil War. And in general, they would die young, leaving a great many bones around that would eventually be misinterpreted by many as where you came from, because you've got a problem with this origin thing. The half-man, half-goats, and half-deers and such were everywhere too. It was a mess, and things were as bad as they could possibly get. But maybe not quite so bad. That dyslexic thing turned out to be worse. So when I was talking to the dog, he was like, wow, you fucked that up or what? And I did. While we were deciding what to do, the dog thought it would be prudent to remove the odd, the mutated, and the deranged from the rest of the population. We placed them in a large wooden box that the dog made, and it included the infected animals and otherwise undesirable animals, and your loyal dogs that followed you. And all locked up tight, safely away from the rest of the normal ones of you. And here again, There is a form of mega irony at play, for in a few hours that followed, there was a rather large solar flare that burst off of our star. It caused all the power on our planet to stop, and due to the cutbacks driven by the now Lord General of the planet Massive Thing, there were no backup plans for this.
"We'll all be fine,"
the Lord General Massive Thing declared.
"We've got no need for a backup plan. When I was in charge of planning and zoning, I built us the largest sewer system in the Great Expanse. All is well."
Yet all was not well. The following storms and floods were amazing, and the walls that held back the water broke, causing a flood right through the storage space, wiping out most of your kind, some leftover parts of last year's gingerbread house models, and my complete collection of the first release DC comics, yes, including Batman 1. How could it be a complete collection without Batman 1? That's a stupid question. The storm set your bull riding on a raging tide of floodwater, right out of the storage area, down the street, and dropped you into, yes, the irony, the largest sewer system in the Great Expanse, built by the not-so-great and not-so-massive Great and Massive Thing. Anyhow, not too surprising that only a handful of you normal humans survived, but, wait for it, all the rejects, the insane and mutant ape fuckers were just fine, safe and dry, inside the box. Thanking now a rather famous dog that they had been told about by a mold form, free and healthy to repopulate the bowl. And once you found high ground and a dry spot to rest on, back in the landfill, the dyslexic masses would soon begin to write about their savior and protector. And that was when you got this idea of God, which is indifferent to modern belief. Dog spelt backwards. Once again, my bad. It is impossible to overstate the damage and impact that this little typo has had on all of you. Wars, death, abject oppression, indentured servitude, mistake after mistake, even the existence of Milli Vanilli, the Bush family, and how anyone could have ever had sex with Donald Trump's father, all can be blamed on this one era. All bad things, from the advent of the monetary system to subprime lending to daylight savings, all my bad. How, may you ask? Because in your small and troubled half-ape minds, you could not keep it all in order. You ended up mashing everything into one big dumb collective stupid single concept that was easy for your minds to handle. I explained that the vastness of the whole damn thing, the multitudes of worlds and life forms within each other on a never-ending plane of infinity, and you all ended up with one simple sentence. God made everything. You could have used any other sentence. You could have gleaned anything. There could have been any other take-home, like a dog made box. At least that would have been factually accurate. Or mold said fucked. Again, crude but true. And so, this is why it is now important that you, Morris, write this down, verbatim. Morris, wake the fuck up.
"I was resting my eyes,"
Morris said, and Glenn scoffed. Whatever. I guess we better get to the real tenets, wisdoms, and laws that you should have. Are you ready?
"I'm ready. Let me have it,"
Morris said with an enthusiasm that put Glenn's mold mind at ease, that he had indeed picked the right half-witted ape brain for the job. Part 3. The Book of Wisdoms, Tenets, and Laws, Best Practices, Due Diligences, Scope of Responsibilities and Rights, Overview on how not to be a complete asshole. Number 1. Assholes. Do not be a complete asshole, or any part of an asshole, nor shall you be the ass or the whole of an ass, even part-time, on the weekends, or out of town when no one knows you. Therefore, there shall not be any so-called 100-mile rule in this matter. The rule is durable and wide-reaching in all states, provinces, countries, republics, dictatorships, freedom-fighter-controlled jungle areas of the South and Central Pacific Islands, peninsulas, and in Canada. This extends to any tribe, race, or religion and political camp, including Republicans. You will not be excused for changing any word in the rule. You are responsible even if you misspell or mispronounce a word. If you try and say that you were an asshole, W-H-O-L-E, or an asshole, drop in both the H or the W, or any such bullshit, you're actually being a bigger asshole. Further, you shall not become an asshole in direct response to an asshole, or indirectly due to an encounter with an asshole. Lastly, for those of you who are hopeless assholes and are incapable of change, you shall be forbidden from procreation, or training adopted, fostered, or random children in your orbit in the ways of assholism under punishment of deportation to North Korea. And believe me when I tell you, that is a real punishment. Think about wearing all grey all the time, shiny, black, uncomfortable, wrong-sized hard shoes, sporting a bowl-cut hairdo, and having to follow the rantings and ravings of the apex asshole of the world. Yeah, so don't do it. Number 2. Worship. Nope, don't do this. Remove from your mind the imbecilic notion that there's someone somewhere that is in control of all things and will smite you for all of time in the pit of fire if you do something wrong, that you will feel your flesh burning forever, that it will be as hot as Central Florida before a hurricane, that there is a demon that will feast on your toes all day, ripping your toenails out with his teeth and smiling at you, singing the collective hits of Barry Manilow off-key as you scream in pain forever. But because, why? Because, not to put too fine a point on it, but that's crazy fucking sick. Look, let's face it. You've got a problem if that's the only thing keeping you from bathing in the blood of the assholes that cut you off in the dark when you're 30 minutes late and then give you the finger. I know you want to cut them and roll around in their blood, but it's wrong, and if that horror fairy tale is the only thing that stops you, you're a monster anyhow. The takeaway here is a simple one. Doing things for a reward or out of fear of punishment does not constitute good character. And if you know someone that works this way, run away from them. They are a demon. Worshipping something or someone is just plain nuts. Best case, you'll be ignorant your whole life, following someone else's voice rather than your own. Worst case, black jumpsuits, new Nikes, plastic bags over your head. Nothing good ever comes from blind, unquestioning worship. Don't believe me? Take a gander at Jim Jones's bio. Number 3. Truth. Protect what is true. There is only one truth. There is not now, nor will there ever be anything like a personal truth, an alternative truth, or another truth. These things are called lies, points of view, or opinions, and when we think of them as truths, they become delusions we sell ourselves about the mess we are in, or the things we have done. The worst of these other truths is the rationalizations. These are the stories, lies, and other non-fact-based things we invent to try and not admit our wrongdoing or mistakes. Just cop to it. If you think there's nothing worse than being wrong, you're wrong. Sounding stupid or delusional is far worse than simply saying, my bad. Be truthful, even if it hurts, even if it makes you look like the mess you are, even if, like me, you have to admit that you may have fucked up the entire human race. The truth is so important that the whole book should be dedicated to it. Because if you get to the point where you cannot believe anything because no one is telling the truth, you might just end up walking around with your head shaved, wearing a few sheer pink curtains as a dress, handing out flowers and asking for donations to tourists at the fucking LAX airport. Because in the absence of truth, people will follow any bullshit, and that leads to blind, unquestioning worship, which I believe we've already covered. The kind that will make you follow in the insane rantings of a pervert with a yellow comb over, some babbling moron with the kind of small hands that come from years of inbreeding, a spray tan, and extra skin folds down his neck that look like a vagina. Following that crowd all the way into the Capitol building while posting on Facebook about it. Your freedom. And then federal jail, where you're in jail. Always be truthful. Seek out truth. Fight against lies of all kinds. Except when your mate asks you if they look fat in their skinny jeans. Then, depending on how much time you have before the dinner reservations or the show time, it's your call. Number 4. Distinguish yourself through your actions. There is nothing sadder than a person dressed up in someone else's clothing. These suits never really fit anyhow. They do make you look like a guy that just got out of jail and then went to the thrift store for some clothes for a job interview washing dishes in a diner off the state road someplace in a small western Kentucky town. Or some girl in a dress that is 3 sizes too small and hangs all wrong everywhere and somehow inexplicably creates not 1 or 2 but 3 muffin tops and fat rolls. How about one more visual for you? How about a grandmother dressed up in Hot Topic gear with 9 different piercings that now look like open wounds and a gaggle of sagging and indistinguishable tattoo designs and a tramp stamp that has migrated from her lower back to right into the middle of her ass cheeks? Does that sound good to you? No. Well, then don't copy others. The point is, be yourself. Follow your own voice and path. You want people to notice you? Do things, good things. Be nice, be a good friend. Be there for someone when it's inconvenient for you. Elsewise, you might run around this joint following every half-assed new trend, idea, or fashion or some shit a vacuous, idle-minded celebrity does and never be yourself. A road that could lead you to getting confused in your life and ending up with a tribal tattoo on your fucking face and neck, along with some absurd and ill-advised new form of body mutilation that connects your genitals to a hole in your eyelid via a metal chain. And then spend the rest of your life trying desperately to explain that move to potential employers, horrified onlookers, and young children huddled close to their mother's legs in mortal fear. It's a lot to process, Morris, but the takeaway here is, again, do not copy others. In the end, you want to be remembered as you, not your attempts to be some other asshole. And number 5, it's not all about you. Many a beheading and malicious life sentence has come from mistaking something a person does with something done to you. You humans are just filthy with self-importance, and while that's not altogether bad, it does have a dark side, and that is that everything that is happening to you. But it really is not all about you. And how the fuck could it possibly be? There are billions of you inside the bowl now, each life of some kind, rubbing up against some other life in some way, happening in the view of others, but in general, no one has been waiting at the light for days on end to pull out in front of you and then make you miss the green. Traffic is the random eventuality of an imbalanced highway system design, and not because you can't be late today. When you have a flat tire, it's not due to the wrong living or not being a good Christian. You ran over something sharp. It happens. There's no one to blame. And as much as that pains you to hear, the other part of that realization is that there's no one to take it out on. No place where your rage-fueled revenge plot or foul retribution plan, embodied as a nemesis, can be aimed. You have an idea where the nail came from, but even that is absent of malice. It's not your neighbor's fault, because he had a box of nails on the bed of his truck for years that finally disintegrated and then started spewing out those little daggers of tire destruction on the main street. He forgot they were even there. Plus, he told his half-witted son to clean out the truck bed over 6 months ago, but that kid keeps forgetting because he is 15, and unless it has blonde hair and a few violatable orifices, he is not listening. So too is harmless the manufacturer of the nail, for the design of some kind of a rubber-tipped nail-activated airbag to protect your fucking tire from their product. Or perhaps you could blame the rubber trees in the Congo for not adapting some all-important and totally predictable stage in your civilization where you would need them to be impervious to metal penetration. Because, not to put too fine a point on it, again, it's not happening to you, it is just happening. And the less you personalize these events, the better a person you will be. Happier, less volatile, you might even live longer. But if you keep thinking that everything is happening to you, you quickly become the victim in a never-ending dramatic opera where you are the central figure that is constantly under siege from all sides, and that will keep you always looking for a fight, for a slight, and never ever being right. You will be the last person invited to anything, the person that everyone talks about before you arrive, as they get a game plan together to try and not piss you off, or make you mad, or give you a reason to climb on your portable cross and nail yourself to it. And then when you leave, they will spend a few hours decompressing while they recount all the ways they hate you and possibly want to have you killed. Plus, this victim lifestyle is the very kind of behavior that leads one to never think about anyone or anything but themselves. See, Selfish People Suck. Next page. So, knock it off. Number 6. Selfish people suck. It's mine. Give it to me. I want it. I need it. What about me? What about my needs? Wah. Selfish people suck, and that's it. There is a truck with a nail in its tire, full of people that would suck your world dry just to fill some deep black hole in their ego if they could. Above all the other non-violent human issues, the selfish are the worst. They are the harbingers of misery. They trade in acts of kindness only to get something in return. aping the actions and emotions of a fully developed human in order to then guilt someone to giving them a worthless ROI. Why is it worthless, you may ask? Because if you are constantly doing to get back, then you never know if the person even likes you. If whatever someone does for you is from the heart, or just because it's payment due. The selfish never even realize that they have reduced genuine human interaction down to a basic quid pro quo. They never experience the joy of selfless giving or caring because in their world, everything is a deal, a spreadsheet of actions and interactions to be totaled and balanced. They tell you they love you to hear you say it back. Just how fucking sick is that? And as such, how can you trust anything they say? How can you feel safe and secure investing any time or real emotions in them? And that is, as the bard said, the rub. They need things just like everybody else, but they have no idea how to go about getting them. These people do not have relationships with anyone. They take hostages and then deploy their own brand of high theater in order to manufacture something that would exist already if they were just better people. That said, it would be easy to make the mistake of feeling sorry for them, but they are far too dangerous to even offer sympathy. They are so skilled and ever vigilant they will use your sympathy to draw you in again. They are to be avoided at all costs, and if you are one, there's little hope for your rehabilitation. So saith the mold. Part 5. Rules and General Guidelines. Number 1. Do not kill each other. It's messy and wrong, and you're already going to die already by getting hit by some out-of-control truck with a flat tire at any time, so just wait for a while, and whomever you're mad at will get their shit anyhow. Consider this. If you kill some asshole and deprive them of the pain of being alone and hated, what good does that do anyone? In fact, you should be nice to them, help them out, forgive them. And if it turns out they're not an asshole and they just made a mistake, they will be sorry. However, if they are a real asshole that intended to hurt you, it will only piss them off more, causing them to really go nuts. And in this way, you can torture them while still being a good guy. It's a win-win. Number 2. Don't steal shit from others. It's all worthless. And there's 4 or 5 generations of a better version waiting in the company's basement of research and development. So whatever you just stole will be outdated and useless in a few months. Then you'll be running around like you've got something great and everyone else will be using their iPhone 14. The one with some half-ass advancement in video that will allow you to do sonograms on random strangers on the subway or control your kitchen blender from your car. You know, some stupid shit just to get you to trade up and renew your contract. And laughing at you for still having the one with the headphone jack. Like that's foolish. Like everyone should just be forced to buy an expensive Bluetooth earbuds. Like we all need 5 different generations of phones. Like we do not know what you motherfuckers are up to. And your planned obsolescence. You do not need shit anyhow. You need purpose. You're not going to be able to steal that from your neighbor. So seek out meaning and denounce toys. 3. Keep your hands to yourself. If someone wants you to grab them, they will tell you. No, really. Morris, are you listening to me? Your sex drive is not licensed to force someone into having sex. And never tell anyone bullshit like it's different from men, or that blue balls hurt, or that you will pull out. Sex should be a consensual thing between 2 or 3 or more people. And while I'm on the subject, don't launch into some half-witted scheme with your friend to get your wives wasted and then force them into some ill-advised group sex or girl-on-girl thing to happen, just so you can watch it. That shit can really backfire on you both anyhow. You may come home one day and find that they have moved in together, and now you and your dumbass friend of yours will be turning over half of everything that you own and paying alimony to the 2 of them, which would be in a very real sense like paying them to fuck each other. That would sting like a motherfucker. And never touch any children, you sick bitch. Why do I even have to write this one down? Number 4. Don't have sex with trees or plants or rocks or animals. You're already doing enough to hurt the environment and kill them all. You don't need to add insult to injury. Plus the optics on that are just horrible. Imagine what it would be like. You're sitting there, looking at a tree or eating grass or thinking fuck all because you're a cow. And the next minute, some horny, smelly, inbred farmer has himself inside you and going to town. or a tree or a plant, just growing, selflessly giving fruit and vegetables to eat, scrubbing the atmosphere so you half-apes have a clean air to breathe, and you violate them for no good goddamn reason other than you plan to have a three-way that went terribly wrong, and now you're living in a studio apartment with this asshole from work that snores every night and never cleans up anything. And lastly, rocks? Look, you fuck a rock, and you should be hit with a hammer and then thrown in a hole, because you're too sick even to live in North Korea. 5. Stay off of other people's mates. Although this sounds like we've covered it, it needs to be more detailed. Unless they invite you, and to be clear about that, you should refuse anyhow. I mean, nothing kills a friendship like your partner yelling out your neighbor's name in the heat of passion, or you coming home and finding that a three-way was running late, or you would have never even known about it. Then you're off, thinking all the time about it, wondering if they're there in bed together, laughing about your lack of skills while having the best sex ever without you. Then you're at Walmart, eyeing the guns with bad thought, checking into flights to some country that has no extradition treaty with the rest of the world, asking a kid in town to go buy you a bag of lime and a pickaxe, slowly rolling past construction sites looking for signs that they're ready to pour concrete, measuring rug areas at the Home Depot to be sure it will hold the body. Just keep it in your lane and in your bedroom, and trust me on this, nothing good can come of being polyamorous. No one is well enough adjusted to handle it. Always remember the lesson of Barbara and Jim. Barbara killed Jim to be with Tara. Just be good people, love each other, live and let live. Number 6. Reject self-importance. Now, Morris, this last bit here is really important. There could be a chance that later on, in a few hundred years or so, that someone might want to use this information for their own benefit. So be sure and write down everything I am saying verbatim. Are we good? And Morris said,
Yaha.
which did not give Glenn the warm fuzzy that he was looking for here, but he forged ahead anyhow. Right then. Do not think that because I'm talking to you that you are something special. Some big choice I made out of thousands of flesh sacks. You were just some idiot who was sleeping outdoors and screaming in the dark. Nothing more. You just happened to be at the right place at the right time, so don't go around reading into it some significance, or that I wanted you to do anything on my behalf, because I do not. You are to write this down and then simply make it available for others to read themselves. Further, I am not laying some heady shit down here. This is all really basic stuff. There's no secret sauce here that you should use to place yourself above others, and then act like you're the only good one. You are all horrible and hateful and weak and nasty and prone to fits of depression, violence, and greed. But you all, too, can be very kind and giving, albeit few and far between. In fact, if you were to take this work and then keep it for yourselves, hide it away, then create a corporation-like system that opened up locations all over the world, and in those locations, some guy in a dress would interpret what I've said in such a way as to manipulate others to worship him whilst he diddled young boys. That would be directly against what I have said, only as an example. And if you were to go out and sell my words for donations, while oppressing facts and influencing politics, laws, and human rights, that would make you an asshole. Again, just an example. And I've already warned you about that. Or, let's say you might want to revise what I've said here, repackage it into some proprietary dogma, force others to believe it, and if they did not, you would kill them? Again, I have said not to kill. Again, only hypothetical. So, in short, any attempt to use this, force others to use it, beat or kill people into following you and your beliefs, get money for this work, act in any way like an asshole, all of these things have already been covered and forbidden in the text previously. And if you did that, you would have to ignore the part of the text in order to pursue those acts. And just who would do something as vile as that? What kind of rat bastard demon fucker would be so insane and self-important to think that he knew better than me? Some total festering ass nugget, that's who. But I thought I should be clear about that. You know, for posterity. You got that, Morris, my boy?
Sure. But could you explain more about diddling?
And then Glenn was sad. He began to think that Morris was already concentrating on the wrong things, already trying to work the system to his benefit, and perhaps that he had picked the wrong idiot. And then Glenn had an idea. What if he told them the possible outcome of their acting wrong, like a prediction of things to come. Glenn knew that he was not able to see the future, but this fat ape with his head full of rocks and bottle caps didn't know that. Maybe he could scare the shit out of him and everyone that read this, so that they would always be good. Look, mate, just do what I say here. We are almost done, but I have some predictions about what might happen. I call it bad things that will happen if you're an asshole for too long.
Well, that seems like a long title,
Morris offered, and he was right. Okay, then, let's call them reveals. No, wait. Future reveals. No, wait. And then Morris said,
how about revelations?
Glenn thought for a moment, and then made Morris's brain 12% smaller, causing Morris to piss himself and shut up, which was a good thing. The last part. The bad things that will happen if you are an asshole for too long. It is understood that from time to time over the course of a life, someone will act in the manner of an asshole. This is not the end of the world. However, if you own that, lean into it, wear it like it's an Olympic gold medal, you are going to suffer. Not at the hands of some unseen godhead or an invisible man in the sky. You're going to suffer in the form of loneliness. You will be hated. This alone should be sufficient reason to stop you from being a full asshole. Yet, I have seen the future, and I can tell you that one person dripping with assholism can start a movement. One person committed to being an asshole could bring about the end of all things. They can engage others in acts of an asshole. That this proto-asshole, this asshole supreme, is the harbinger of end times. And then you could get some shit started. It could possibly catch on. People stop caring about each other, people banding together and only caring about the others who think and act just like them, like total assholes. Then, in the fullness of time, they will rage over the land and sea, making up laws and rules that force other non-assholes to follow them, or they will be punished. It will start wars, kill millions, lie and hide education, let people die, make their followers shave their heads, abstain from sex, write the most insane shit you've ever seen to control people. Really sick shit. They will rule on high from every seat of power in every nation, waging war on women and minorities and people like Barbara and Tara, whose only sin was to dig each other and kill Jim. I hate to keep coming back to that, but really, Jim was an asshole anyhow, and if he was getting the job done, Tara would have just been a thing that happened once or twice with Barbara, like in college, no big deal. Then, still further in the future, I can see a time where one dress-wearing, mad-as-hell old white man will scream orders down at the dumb beast masses. Those left will have to conform to everything he told them out of fear, and this man will care nothing about anyone but himself and his laws. The power will have gone to his head, and while he's too busy controlling everything, burning everything and wasting everything, outlawing butt plugs and castrating goats, dancing like a power-mad dervish in the glee of his ultimate control over all people in the world, and then slowly, steadily, the world will stop working. The water will warm, the ice will melt, the rains will fall endlessly, drag queens will sing no more, the floods will rage over the land, the trees will die, the fish will boil, and then there will be no internet, or internet porn, or even a fans-only page left, not even one old, dog-eared copy of a 1979 Playboy magazine shall be found in the dry, scorched earth. And then, at the last, the sky will grow dark, as the last Amazon order will be delivered, and it will be an empty box. And this will signify the end of days. The air will be poisoned, and the world will be no more. The punch bowl will be barren, a death zone, its flimsy sides folding inward, its bottom prolapsed and hanging outward, like a large, lifeless, gaping asshole. And if that doesn't dissuade you from being an asshole, you're already one. So saith Glenn the Mold. The very last part of the last part. The last words of Glenn the Mold. Who will provide the grand design? What is yours and what is mine? For there are no more new frontiers. We have got to make it here. These are the words that will be written thousands of years from now by a wise man from Texas, of all places. He will start a band, and he will call it the Eagles. And he will, like me, try to warn people. But it will be the 70s, and no one will be listening because of the cocaine and the polyester and the fucking disco. Morris, wake the fuck up! Glenn screamed at his moronic scribe, but Morris had slipped into a coma from not eating or sleeping for 12 days, and from the blood loss from his punctured finger. He would be placed on life support, but due to an ill-advised DNR filled out by his father, Lou, Morris would pass away without finishing the last of Glenn's thoughts. Glenn then fell silent, never to speak again. This unfinished manuscript would lay hidden by the rocks for many years on the outskirts of Zabithica, until a wandering cross-dressing minstrel would happen upon it and use it as toilet paper, discarding it in a bush outside a pub of what would become the small town of Kilton in northern Scotland. The tree bark would slip into a peat bog and be preserved for thousands of years until an oil company broke ground on the plant nearby. When the bog was excavated, the bark tablets would be found and then placed in a museum of tree bark history ran by an insane Scots sheep farmer called Angus McShanklegs in 1953. Upon his death in 1988, he left the museum, which was just a few bits of trees and some soiled underwear, and a few sheep skulls filled with heather, and a complete untarnished and totally preserved version of the Zabithican Gospel to his only living relative, the world-famous author and ordained minister, Richard Hendry. Hendry would spend the bulk of the next 25 years trying to translate the text, which was written in the ancient Zabithican language of total fucking gibberish. Herein lay the cumulative work of that effort. He offers it as a lost part of prehistory, as a warning, and as a roadmap for posterity, in the hopes that we can avoid the asshole end of days. For more information on the Zabithican Gospel and where to find your local Zabithican Temple of Knowledge, visit www.zabithican.org. This has been the Zabithican Gospel by Richard Hendry. Copyright 2023.